sense that Murderbot has a thing for Thiago, but not like in a weird way, just like in a it's kind of obsessed with Thiago kind of way. Network Effect by Martha Wells is one of the best books I've ever read, and I have read a lot of books. And of course, it won, like, all of the awards the year it came out. And here I go to defend why it deserves every single one of these awards, because it is delightfully rich, especially upon a reread. And the thing that impressed me most about Network Effect was the richness of the subtext in this book. So that's kind of what I want to pick apart here, is all the little clues we get from chapter to chapter and interaction to interaction that builds to various thematic and character purposes. It is the 5th book in the Murderbot series, which, as a general overview, is a series about this robot/cyborg character named Murderbot, who for a while was in slavery to this company, broke out, made some friends, went on adventures, and now here in Network Effect, we get to see even more of those adventures. And when I say my preparation for this video has lasted months and has included reading the book 3 whole times, I am not exaggerating, so today we have an agenda. So, you ready for this ride? We're going to go on! We've got talking about the relationships with humans with emphasis on the protective side and Amena, then an entire section on Thiago, who is such an important character to this book, and I love all these little interactions. You ready? Let's go! From chapter 3, Ratthi came to my cabin. I didn't have to let him in, so I did. I know, I was still getting used to the idea of not minding the fact that a human wanted to talk to me. And so we have the foundation of Murderbot's friendships with humans, which is his freedom to choose to be friends or not to be friends. And Ratthi very much is one of Murderbot's friends, and of all the relationships, I would categorize it as the most friendliest. And I would say that this is because Ratthi just generally cares about Murderbot and enjoys its company. But if we look at it from Murderbot's perspective, we see that we have a different thing coming. Because when Murderbot is considering Rathi's positive opinion on it, it says, he's never seen me kill anyone up close, and I'd like to keep it that way. Like Ratthi only trusts and cares about Murderbot because it doesn't realize that Murderbot is a killer? Of all my humans except Dr. Mensa, he listens to me the most carefully. Probably it has something to do with the time he was about to step out of the hopper and retrieve some equipment, and if he had, he would have been eaten by giant predatory fauna. So Murderbot chalks up Rathi's love for it as 1, not realizing that it's a crazy killer, and 2, because it saved his life once. But that doesn't seem actually accurate, and so we see the lens of the unreliable narrator. Because Murderbot is still lacking some fundamental experience with making and keeping friends, it's seeing the world through the lens of they're my friends because it's convenient for them, because they don't really understand all the true details about my nasty sides. When they really are aware of all those details. And Murderbot comes to understand this concept and friendship in general better throughout the course of this book as it better bonds especially with Amena. Because in this book, Amena does get to see it kill, up close and personal, a lot, very violently, and we will get to that emotional breakdown later when we talk about its relationship with art. But for Amena, despite her seeing Murderbot brutally murder people a few times, she is still willing to defend it to the end of the book. That even at the end, Amena is saying, no, it doesn't like to be touched, like, don't touch Murderbot, defending Murderbot, and respecting its boundaries and opinions. And most importantly, trusting Murderbot, and we're gonna get more into that in a minute. I absolutely love Amena as a character that when she's first introduced, she's a little bit like the whiny teenager, and then the more we get to know her, the more Murderbot gets to know her, the more they actually form a friendship, and the more that I admire Amena for how strong and brave she is. But even from the beginning, Murderbot is in a protective role over Amena. It breaks her relationship up with this shady guy on their home planet, which was a pretty funny scene. And the scene right after that, where Amena is confronting Murderbot like, well, why did you break me and my boyfriend up, is pretty telling too, because as soon as Murderbot actually responds, she's surprised. She says, I didn't know, I never heard you talk. Which gives us another insight from how things feel different from Murderbot's point of view and the outside point of view. And we are inside Murderbot's point of view, and Murderbot feels like it interacts fully with its surroundings, with the people. It's always making commentary and sending people messages and stuff. But then, when you look at it from an outside perspective, Murderbot doesn't actually talk that much, especially around people that it isn't comfortable with. And this early interaction between Murderbot and Amena just makes a later one even more poignant. Because when they've both been kidnapped by enemies and are hiding away on the enemy ship, Amena is scared and she says, in a smaller voice, please talk to me. Because she just wants that interaction. She wants to have a relationship with Murderbot, especially as they're stranded together on this enemy turf. And throughout their misadventures here, Amena continues to want to form this bond with Murderbot, even after the dramatic scene of Murderbot going ballistic on these enemy raiders. Amena limped forward another step. She grabbed my arm and glared up at me. Listen to me. And of course, this is an incredibly brave and trusting move that Amena has just seen a demonstration of how incredibly physically dangerous and emotionally distraught Murderbot is. And yet, she trusts it still to put herself within its radius, to make a demand. And it's that giving of unconditional trust that Murderbot responds to so well. And Amena wants this relationship for safety, but also just for someone else to like her. That as later she brings up again to Murderbot the situation where he broke up her and her boyfriend, she says, "Why did you do it? You don't care about me. You didn't even really know me then." And of course, Amena here is wanting Murderbot to correct her. Like, no, I do care about you. I did care about you. She is looking for reassurance, especially as she kind of sees Murderbot as a parental figure. She even calls it third mom. And trust is a big part of this book. I needed her to trust me to get her out of this alive. Murderbot wants and needs people to trust it, and this is tied in with its protective side, which is all tied up with it trying to establish independence and not being a slave anymore. When it's panicking, Murderbot says, "I didn't like the idea of saying I don't know to Amena because humans panic and I almost don't blame them because right now I feel like panicking and I was not in control of the situation. I could see at least 10 instances now where I'd made wrong decisions and being in control of the situation was really important because otherwise it was in control of me and that felt like a short step to being back in the company's control." So why is Murderbot a control freak? Because it is grasping for that control that has been elusive for most of its life. And part of being that control freak is having people follow its orders. Part of people following its orders is people trusting it, which is why it's such a problem that Thiago doesn't really. More on that later. And again, so many of Murderbot's actions are motivated by getting the humans to trust it more. From little behavioral things it does, to not admitting weakness, to just feeling really protective over these humans. When Ross dies, Murderbot is genuinely upset despite barely knowing him. He wasn't my human, but he popped off right in front of me and I hadn't been able to do anything about it. They're so fragile. Murderbot considers it kind of its duty to take care of all of these humans because that's a way for it to be in control of the situation and that makes it feel better. And Murderbot is not only protective but possessive of these humans. It regularly refers to them as my humans. It tells Art, "Don't hurt my humans," which is a funny and kind of ironic twist to it not wanting to be owned by any humans and kind of rejecting those kind of relationships and yet claiming ownership over the humans. But being protective over humans is Murderbot's emotional lifeline. When it's in the midst of its emotional breakdown and doesn't really know how to deal with it, how does it finally admit to itself the problem and start talking through it? Because Amena is asking it for help, and it coming clean to her is part of helping. Amena says, "There's something you're not telling me and it's scaring me. I'm not a hero like my second mom or a genius like everybody else in my family. I'm just ordinary and you're all I've got." I wasn't expecting that. It was so far from what I thought she had meant, and she was so upset that the truth inadvertently came out. My friend is dead. So for Murderbot, this was an expression of its own feelings, but also a way to comfort Amena, to answer her question and request. And we see that again later in the book when Murderbot is abandoned on this enemy planet, injured and alone and not knowing if rescue's gonna come. It's freaking out. "I sat on the floor having an emotion, or maybe a couple of emotions, while my organic skin went alternately cold and hot and my knee made disturbing clicking noises." But then it gets some communication from the outside world and realizes that there's something it needs to protect. Something it needs to live for and fight for. My new friend, Sec Unit 3, who if I actually got out of this alive, I'd have to do something with, like civilize or educated or whatever. Like what the humans originally wanted to do with me. And Murderbot later isn't enthusiastic to actually take on this quest, but in the moment, this is what it latches onto, is helping someone. One that it is uniquely qualified to help. And now we end the intermission to go back to our regularly scheduled programming of Thiago and Murderbot's relationship to him. And we've already discussed how Murderbot really needs people to trust it. That's part of it feeling comfortable and in control of a situation. It's part of it making friends and feeling integrated into the society. And so we have Thiago, the foil to this Murderbot needs everyone to trust it, because Thiago most certainly does not trust Murderbot. And then, over the course of the book, he kind of learns to trust Murderbot, but that is a journey that they both go on together. And we will now kind of go on it. Even from the, first page of the book, you get the sense that Murderbot has a thing for Thiago, but not in a weird way, just in a it's kind of obsessed with Thiago kind of way. Because Thiago is like the cog that won't fit in Murderbot's nice control freak machine. Thiago was firmly in the let's investigate the dark cave without that pesky sec unit group. Okay, I admit it was a little upsetting that Thiago didn't trust me. He doesn't like me, I don't like him, and that was fine. It was absolutely fine, and from this we know it's absolutely not fine. Murderbot cares deeply about what Thiago thinks, and part of that is also because Murderbot deeply respects Thiago's abilities. It is constantly complimenting him. Thiago might actually talk her way out of this. He was great at talking to other humans. Oftentimes, Murderbot is praising his knowledge and level-headedness and logical skills. And what does that say about Thiago choosing not to trust Murderbot? Well, it says it's a good opinion based in logic from a person Murderbot respects. Oh no, this is hard to deal with. Because, of course, Murderbot doesn't want to accept the fact that it's untrustworthy, and yet this person that it deeply respects seems to think so. And because Murderbot is so worried about Thiago not trusting it, this is what it assumes all of Thiago's issues are. Which comes back to the unreliable narrator thing, because we'll see as we pick apart some more subtext, that's not exactly where all of the issues are. But to Murderbot, it is. Thiago had given me the look that usually means it just wants an excuse to kill someone. Very much like a human who didn't trust its sec unit's situation assessment. Even when Amena tries to tell Murderbot that Thiago doesn't really mistrust it completely, but it was strange that her view of Thiago's opinion of me was so different from the objective reality. Your Uncle Thiago doesn't trust me. Not that I was upset about that or cared about it at all. So what are Thiago's real issues with Murderbot? Why doesn't he trust it? What is the root of this problem here? Well, you could argue that it's just the regular prejudice against sec units, assuming that they're crazy killer monsters. And that's certainly part of it, and we'll get into that kind of prejudice in a minute. But I don't think that's all of it, because Thiago does feel unaffected from the prejudice that would come from, say, watch a TV show about sec units that portrays them in an evil light. Because when Thiago comes across a dead sec unit, he says it's in some kind of military suit, like he doesn't recognize sec unit armor. Which says that 1, he's never interacted with sec units in armor, but 2, he's also not seen the type of armor they wear on TV and in movies and stuff. So Thiago has, in general, escaped the worst of the anti-sec unit propaganda. But hasn't completely escaped that propaganda, because Thiago does assume that Murderbot has killed all of the pirates that went and attacked them. Murderbot did not kill a single pirate, but when Thiago confronts it, it's kind of too mad at Thiago to just say, hey, I didn't kill them. It has to aggravate Thiago instead. And there are other instances of Thiago totally taking offense at how murdery Murderbot is. Thiago points out, if they weren't all dead, we could ask them. Yeah, that was aimed at me. But this is all connected to actual incidents of Murderbot killing people. Or what do we call them? Targets, I said. Thiago did a thing with his eyes that was like an eye roll, but not quite. Obviously, Thiago doesn't like Murderbot's kill the targets kind of mentality. But also, we see Thiago slowly coming around to a little bit of that point of view, as well as continually trying to make peace with Murderbot. When they're telling a story about past colonizers that were saved by a kind of sec unit thing, Thiago says, so, they were saved by a machine intelligence. Like he's pointing out to Murderbot, you're good at saving people too. Or maybe you could be a little less murdery and save people too. And there are many other instances of Thiago making nice and trying to befriend and better trust Murderbot. And oftentimes it's Murderbot's own abrasiveness, reacting to Thiago's past and kind of present offensiveness, that drive them further apart instead of together. Like, one of my favorite instances in chapter 2, right after Murderbot has not killed the pirates, but Thiago thinks that he probably did, he said, did you kill those people? And Murderbot doesn't want to answer, antagonizes him, etc. Then he hesitated and said, look, I didn't mean to get you shot. I'm sorry. And the way that this sentence, I didn't mean to get you shot, I'm sorry, just comes out of the blue, pretty unprompted from their conversation up to that point, I would hypothesize that this is the reason Thiago originally sought Murderbot out. Thiago said to himself, I'm going to go apologize because I got Murderbot shot and I want to have a better relationship with Murderbot. But at the moment of seeing Murderbot, he just got so worked up about the possibility that Murderbot had killed all of those pirates that that's what came out of his mouth instead. And then later he tried to backtrack back to saying sorry. But even though their relationships are repeatedly confrontational, Thiago still trusts Murderbot's opinion on a lot of things and backs it up in many group discussions. Because they're both often taking the skeptic point of view. And later, Thiago is really making like a genuine effort to try to mend this bridge. Thiago looked at me and I looked at the wall. He said, I want to thank you for everything you did for Amena. Was it grudging or was I just in a terrible mood? I don't know. I have no idea, so I didn't respond. And I don't think that this is super grudging. I think this is genuinely how Thiago feels. And also probably came at the urging of other crew members, such as Ratthi, saying like, you need to trust Murderbot. You need to form a good relationship with our chief of security. And a hint at this conversation that probably went on behind the scenes comes in chapter 10. You just want to believe the best about everyone, Oversay said, still a little skeptical. Ratthi snorted. No, that's Thiago. I'm optimistic, but a realist. Thiago looked mildly insulted. Because of course, Thiago doesn't believe the best about everyone. See, Murderbot? And this is Ratthi poking at that. And slowly, Thiago starts to trust Murderbot even more. Because Thiago is trusting Murderbot and seeing it as a person that needs to be protected and loved and cared for. Thiago says in chapter 12, I got you shot on our survey, I'm not letting you go alone into danger. And we can see the confirmation that Thiago knows that Murderbot cares deeply about his safety and the safety of everyone on the team based on the joke he makes. They're in a dangerous situation, exploring a dangerous station. Thiago said briskly, should we split up? I was facing the right-hand corner and didn't turn around. I don't know what my back told him, possibly it was my shoulders having a reaction to how my jaw hinge was grinding, but he added, and that was a joke. And why is this joke funny? It is because it is playing with the contrast of them splitting up, and of course Murderbot never letting them split up, because at this point Thiago is understanding that Murderbot is a trustworthy control freak that is genuinely looking out for him. But Murderbot being a control freak is also part of the conflict for Thiago, because Thiago himself is also kind of a control freak, and he is incredibly bothered by Murderbot not listening to him, by Murderbot not following his orders or being completely obedient, falling in line, answering his questions, etc. I wish I could give it orders. It doesn't listen to me. I listen to you plenty, Thiago. But the root of Thiago's problem with Murderbot is the way it's a symbol of Mensa's problems with Thiago. Mensa is Murderbot's friend. Mensa went through a traumatic experience and is having a really hard time processing it. And so Mensa is avoiding talking about it with her family, and will talk about it with Murderbot. And so Thiago feels that Murderbot has way too much influence over Mensa, that Murderbot is using this influence, this trust that Mensa has with Murderbot, to manipulate her into being scared, into not talking with her family, into whatever. And I think Thiago is also jealous of Murderbot's relationship with Mensa, how they have grown closer as Thiago and Mensa themselves have grown farther apart. Even in the flashbacks, when Murderbot walks up to a conversation between Thiago and Mensa, the glance Thiago threw at me was annoyed, like I had interrupted their conversation. And when Thiago comes out and says his problems with Murderbot, he says, you have leverage over Mensa. And this fear only gets deeper and more layered as Thiago sees the relationship that Murderbot and Amena are building, which is kind of similar to Murderbot and Mensa's. And because Thiago is a control freak, trusting Murderbot and admitting that they kind of need Murderbot's security help is also admitting that Thiago can't handle it himself. That he's weak, that he's too weak to help Mensa through her emotional trauma, that he's too weak to take care of his own or to stop the pirates from getting killed. But after that gets cleared up and Thiago better understands Murderbot and Mensa's relationship and how it's pretty wholesome actually, things slowly get smoothed over with Thiago reaching out more and more and Murderbot slowly coming to accept these reaching outs. And I'm excited to see where their relationship goes from here. And thank you for watching, but this video is getting a little long, so join me for part 2. For the rest of our agenda, including the delicious relationship between Murderbot and its best friend, Art. And of course, there are so many things that I wanted to put in this video, but it was just getting too much. But if you pick a few conversations with me in the comments, you can probably find out some more juicy details.